Hey, what's up guys, Rev here. So I'm sure a lot of you are aware of the various threats that might impact the quality of anime and manga as it is produced and released overseas. We are aware of things like poor localizations and bad translations, other quality control issues that might impact the quality of anime and manga as it goes out to Western markets. But there is a new push that is even more concerning, and that is a lot of pressure being exerted on Japanese studios to create and appeal their content towards a global audience with different standards than they are used to. All of these threats are something that are very real when it comes to anime and manga and their quality, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to start with this article recently released saying, Disney Plus Japan executive admits anime industry making a shift towards more acceptable expressions in order to appeal to wider audiences. And anytime you see this language about a wider or global audience, you should be concerned. Because in the past, we would have to wait for localizations to really make the impact of how to censor and alter content coming out of Japan. But at this point, we've reached now, they are targeting the studios themselves. There's pressure being put on these studios at the ground level to make their work with an initial focus on these global audiences and global standards, and that should concern you greatly. Now, before we get into this article, I want to share a little Mother's Day weekend advanced GG bundle available for you guys. So in this bundle, you can purchase an ice shaker with mom right here as the label, and you can pick out one of their many different delicious flavor jars to go along with it. And if you complete that bundle, you get this free jar of sleep hibiscus, which I believe is around a $40 value. Very good stuff. And if you do this bundle or you just want to check out other products on Advanced GG's website, of course, at checkout, use code REV to get 10% off your order. I'll put a link to all this stuff in the pinned comment. So moving back to this article, Disney Plus Japan executive admits anime industry making a shift towards more acceptable expressions in order to appeal to wider audiences. Now, anytime you see this phrase wider or global audiences, you should already be concerned. And a lot of people are concerned about Disney's latest push to acquire a lot of anime licenses, because what is Disney going to do with these titles? A lot of people are concerned that they might censor or alter them. And of course, now we can cite this global or wider audience as one of the justifications they might use to alter these broadcasts. Now, also, I will point out this shift towards more acceptable expressions is a wild phrase. Okay, it's always people who are the most gratuitous who try to come up with these wacky phrases that honestly are pretty offensive at their core. They're basically saying what's going on in Japanese media is somehow problematic and needs to be adjusted for a wider audience, aka the rest of the world or the Western sphere, right? And that's a pretty offensive thing to say. This is the type of virtue signaling, white savior type stuff you see on social media, but unfortunately now it is bled into companies like Disney Plus and Japanese studios, by the way. But continuing on into the article, it says this: in finally giving confirmation to the bitter truth that many fans of the medium already knew, Disney Plus Japan boss Takuto Yawata has admitted that the wider anime industry is actively attempting to change its core identity in an attempt to make the medium more appealing to global audiences, particularly those located in the Western world. Now, here is the problem with having such a focus on westernizing and making anime more appropriate for a global audience. It is taking away the identity of anime. Anime is different. It is unique. And that is the reason a lot of people over the decades have gravitated towards anime and manga as opposed to traditional Western media. Anime and manga is something different. It looks different. It feels different. It is just something that is refreshing for a lot of people, and that is the appeal. That is why a lot of people have gravitated towards those Japanese mediums, because it's something different. So when you're trying to globalize and westernize anime and manga, you are taking away what makes it unique. If these people want to make these Western-styled products, then go make them. You don't have to take existing mediums and change them or try to change them at their core, which is happening with a lot of these Japanese studios, in order to create new Western media or something for a global audience. Make something separate. Don't change something that is good, something that is different, to become just like everything else. But continuing on, we've seen Capcom do this very recently. We talked about this in a recent video. They talked about their localization process and their goals. And we saw this language down here about a good localization makes players feel right at home wherever in the world they are. And I don't know about you guys, I don't want to feel at home when I'm watching anime or manga or playing a Japanese video game. I don't want to feel at home. If I wanted to feel at home, I would look out for more Western-styled pieces of media. I don't want to feel at home when I'm watching the latest magical girl anime. I don't want it to relate to me. It's not supposed to relate to me, and it's very, very, I think, honestly, backwards to try to do this. Again, it's some sort of complex where they feel like anything going on in the Japanese media is it just cannot be understood by these Western viewers, and it's very silly to tailor everything to these people who probably don't have much of an interest in it in the first place. But moving on in the article, here's the next part, in quotes from the executive saying, "What has changed compared to 10 years ago is that we used to think of the business as a set of videograms and TV broadcasts, and we used to make works for people who could buy videograms," he explained. "We were making films for people who could buy videograms. Videograms are still around today, of course, but streaming distribution has become more common, and the target audience is no longer limited to the domestic market. The rise of streaming distribution is why it spread globally. It is playing a very large role as a communication tool for users around the world, and I believe that Japanese animation is still in the process of evolving." Of course, everything is in the process of evolving, but at what point does this evolution become just an inherent change at the core? And that's what it seems like with all of these pushes. It seems like a push to change these forms of Japanese media at their core so they are immediately appealing to a global audience. They don't even have to wait for the localizations to change something. They want it changed right at the start. And that should concern you. And again, this idea that streaming distribution helped bring anime out into the forefront on a global audience. Well, that is true, but that doesn't mean it now has to change itself for that global audience. It reached out and expanded into a global audience because people found it endearing. They found it interesting, something different. That's why they liked anime and manga. Now you want to turn around and change it to be just like everything else on the global market, which takes away from the uniqueness of this various examples of Japanese media. And we've seen studios like Kadokawa totally embrace this. It's been going on for years. This is nothing new. They have made it very clear in public statements that they have an overseas first policy when it comes to creating their products. And we've seen some of the results in many different forms, but the most recent one was the ReZero Season 3 teaser that featured a lot of censorship of various outfits from the manga as opposed to the new anime trailer here. And before, the weirdos on Twitter say something, they're like, aha, see, they censored the outfits, they gotcha. Well, okay, well, they're still pretty exposed. But the fact that they felt it necessary to censor these at all in the first place is exactly why this push for a global audience is something that is actually having an impact. And we saw that reflected in the comments of the character designer for ReZero Season 3 saying, "This isn't limited to ReZero, but in order to deliver to many countries, there are broadcast codes for each country, and in order to reach many people, the people on the set are working hard to deliver the best possible content within the many restrictions." And that is something that probably confuses some people because there's multiple layers of issues here, but they seem very intertwined. So on the one hand, you have these moral attempts at censorship where companies are being pressured into changing these things because outside forces are telling them X, Y, and Z is bad and you should change that. And then there's regulatory requirements that are also exerting censorship and also making some studios impose self-censorship to avoid getting their broadcast cut off in certain regions of the world. Now, if those things sound similar, it's because they are. They're very intertwined. It's all about morality, and whether it's in code or just spoken as a office directive, these things are all aimed at censoring Japanese media that these global audiences are finding morally offensive or what have you. Now, moving forward in the article, we get the main quote here. So it says, in turn, the Disney executive opined, "I don't think there's been any major shift. The fundamental storytelling, the precision of the action has not changed, but there may have been a shift towards adopting more acceptable expressions." Like I said earlier in the video, the idea of an acceptable expression is offensive on its face. It is saying blatantly that whatever this Japanese media is, in whatever form it is, there has to be some sort of an acceptable expression that is shared to the rest of the world. That this needs to be censored and altered in ways to remove all of these icky things coming out of this Japanese media that the global audience would never accept. And that is very offensive, and it's a moral grandstanding point. And we've seen this also with payment processors. We've talked about that in the past, where it seems like MasterCard and Visa, they clamp down the hardest on Japanese companies, whether it's art platforms or studios, what have you. They pull their services and threaten these companies unless they remove typically not safe for work content or just generally lewd content. And it seems like they clamp down the hardest on Japanese companies. And when it comes to Western counterparts, they are left alone. And it seems very, very strange. There seems to be a moral crusade against Japanese companies. It's really Japanese media and Japanese culture as a whole. And I think it's totally masked off at this point. I don't think anyone is trying to hide it, and it's becoming a real issue. Now, moving on from that article, I also saw this, just really quickly want to share this. So Disney Plus, Hulu, and Max will be offered in a new package bundle this summer in the US. Disney and Warner Bros. Discovery has announced. So here's the thing. It's starting to sound like, what's that thing? Cable TV. At this point, there are so many bundles like this. It's starting to sound like it's all going back to the fundamentals of cable TV with all these networks joining together in one station. It's very strange. And also I bring this up because if you want to watch certain anime, especially if it has multiple seasons or it's been owned by multiple studios, you might need multiple subscriptions to various streaming platforms just to complete the entire franchise. And I think the most ridiculous example is always Pokemon, right? If you want to watch the complete Pokemon anime, I think you have to have something like 20 plus paid subscriptions to various streaming networks. It's absolutely insane. And despite the fact some of these are consolidating and becoming bundles, doesn't make it much better. And honestly, it's getting more and more expensive and making it harder for people to access these things in the first place. But moving on, I want to talk about the other threat to the distribution of anime and manga overseas, and that has to do with translations. And in this case, a very interesting post that has been generating a lot of conversation. So here's the translation saying, the English translation of Kengan is a bit unique. So we decided to leave it up to a group of amateurs who translated without permission and uploaded it illegally. Their translation was far better than the official one. It would be pretty bad if they used the official version. No one would read it, and I think there have been many works that didn't go over well overseas because of translation issues. I wonder how that would be with AI. So basically what this post is saying is that the Kengan translation, the English translation, was really shoddy. The official one was really shoddy. And as it turns out, this is the result of this Japanese studio using AI translation without any sort of checks and balances on it. And the author of Kengan saw some unofficial, illegal works where people were translating this as fans, and that product was better than the official translations. And the author said, hey, you know what? I'm going to take the fan translations over these official ones because they're better quality, which I think is a crazy thing. And some people have been saying, hey, this is a big own on the localizers, but I don't think this really has anything to do with localizers yet in this situation. This is a quality control issue on the ground where these companies are using translations, AI translations, and typically they're getting away with it because the companies that they're giving it back to, they don't even know it's poor quality. Luckily, in this case, the author here does speak English and understands that those AI translations, the official ones, were poor quality because of the AI. And of course, they saw the unofficial ones and said, hey, this is better quality. This will be better for the audience. So we're going to go with that. Now, a lot of people also brought up this post in relation to the previous one, where there is apparently a manga AI localization startup company that somehow secured $19 million to translate up to 500 new manga volumes per month into English. And this is a crazy situation. Some people are excited about this. Some people are very mad about this. I think overall this is just a symptom of the many issues involving the translation and localization of Japanese media. This is what happens when you provide for so long shoddy translations and terrible and irresponsible localizations, you're going to end up with a solution like this. And maybe it's not the best solution, but the fact that this is getting supported should tell you there is some major problems with the localization and translation of anime and manga into English. This is a very big problem. And again, my take with AI is that it's great if it's something that replaces something that's not available. I worded that very poorly, but basically what I'm saying is if there is a Japanese manga out there and there is no English translation anywhere, and it's never going to happen, at least you have the AI translation. But this shouldn't be the next step. The problem is, the reason people didn't feel bad for localizers is that they have been abusing their position as localizers to inject all kinds of nonsense into their translations. So that's why nobody felt bad for them when they're losing their jobs to AI. However, you can also recognize that AI is not the perfect solution. The perfect solution is having accurate and honest translations. Unfortunately, a lot of studios are cheap or have limited resources, and they don't take the time or the necessary resources to provide these good translations into English. And it's a very difficult problem. That's something that won't be solved by me yapping in this video. This is a very systemic, bigger issue, but there's a lot at play here. There's issues on the translation level and there's issues on the localization level. And here's some of the proposed solutions to this. And look at the support it got. $19 million of funding for this project. That is insane. But for now, that is going to do it for this video. Obviously, a lot of controversial topics today. So as always, feel free to share your thoughts about them in the comment section down below. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.